everyone, welcome to the Art Workshop. My name is Christopher Epling. We're so glad you tuned in today for our special episode. We're going to be covering a very well-known local legend but true story, a story that has turned into almost mythic proportions here in our region, that of Octavia Hatcher. Now, at the time of this filming, of course, it's around Halloween, so not to take away from the seriousness of what happened, because this is a true story. It's a tragic story. And many times, though, this time of year, folks will reminisce on certain events that's happened that has an element of mystery to them, right? Because it's that season. It's the season of the pumpkin. So we are going to focus on that today, which means we're going to be doing a profile shot. So this is going to be an actual figure drawing. So those of you who like figure drawing or want to learn more about it, today's your show. In today's show, we're going to be using only pencils, eraser, and of course a sharpener. We're going to be smudging some to get shadow and detail in fabric, and then also focusing on what really does it take to draw at least a semi-correct features of a human figure. And that can be a little difficult and a little challenging for me and any artist that tries to draw a human figure. It can. Now, I'm not a realistic portrait artist, so what that means is I can't sit down and do a photorealistic image of a person. I do a rendering of a person, which means that it's my interpretation of it, so I come as close as I can. My approach to it falls somewhere in between character drawing, cartoonish type drawing, animation, and then realistic. So somewhere in there we have an answer. Let's take a look at our workspace today. So the first thing you need, of course, if you're going to do a historic figure, you need an actual image of the historic figure. I chose to pull up a drawing of Octavia, but mostly because that helps me to figure out how another artist rendered it, and then I can go from there. We've got pencils, of course, like I said, eraser. Now these are carbon pencils, graphite pencils. It means that there's no wood, it's all graphite. I got a couple of those here, and then of course I got my large graphite stick for more deep shadowing, and each one of these has a different, so this is a 2H pencil, and then I'm using this one here, which is a 6B, and then this one here, of course, I think it's definitely a B2. I'm not really sure where it falls on that range, though. So let's go ahead now and start to consider how do we approach this drawing to get a realistic looking version of this historic character. Now, the tale of Octavia Hatcher, as we're sketching out first for her head, goes something like this. So she had trouble during a pregnancy, ended up, unfortunately, tragically losing the baby. This sent her into a very deep melancholy mood, depressed mood, which resulted in her eventually, I guess, getting to the point of her life where she stopped eating and she stopped wanting to do much of anything. And it's understandable after a tragic event like that someone would be very distraught. But she ended up seemingly to pass away. She had no vital signs. Now you have to consider the time period this happened in. This was in the 1800s, so there wasn't as advancements in healthcare and response, EMT type abilities back then. Basically, you had a doctor who's responsible for determining the death of someone. If someone is actually dead, they pronounced her dead, buried her, and as the tale goes, she was actually alive during all that. So she was buried alive. So now what I've done so far is I've sketched out an oval for the head here. Now notice what I've done. I'm going to darken this in for you can see it a little more. I'm basically creating an egg shape that's tilted on its side just a little bit. So you have this line that features the chin, and then up to the hairline here. Now how do you determine facial features on a portrait drawing? So the first thing you want to consider is where is the center of the face. The center of the face in this instance is going to be coming down like this. So you can see basically on how I've drawn this, how the head is orientated. It's to the side just a little bit, so you're picking up a chin line here, okay, and you're also picking up the ear here just a little bit. It's going to be covered in hair somewhat, but you're still going to be able to determine where it's at, okay? Now we're going to come right behind this shape we've just made, and we're going to bring a line coming down over to the right, and then another line coming down over to the left. Now that frames her neck, and it starts to go into her shoulders, which we're not going to really go into just yet. Now, I'm using a lighter pencil, but I'm pushing down so you can see it because I'm going to have to do some erasing here. Once I have the center line for the face, I'm also going to create a couple more secondary lines here that kind of shows me or orientates me where the nose is, the eyes, and then of course the mouth. So we're looking at something like that. So 3 little dashes will work. Some artists will go ahead and create a circle in behind here to frame up the skull. You can do that if you want, if it helps you some to form the chin line. But what I like to do is I like to get in here and start making marks. I see which ones work, which ones don't, and whichever ones don't, of course, I erase them. So I frame the nose there just a little bit. Now the eyebrow is going to come up just above this hatch mark here for where I'm placing the eye. And then we'll have another one over to the left here. So that frames the eyebrows, comes down to the nose area. The mouth, the lips are going to be framed like this. You're going to come up, down, and down for the upper lip. And then the bottom lip's going to protrude out just a little bit with a shadow just below here. Now, so far what we have is at least something that resembles a face. But what I want to do, I want to shape this up a little bit. So the forehead's going to come up. This will come down. So you have the eye socket there. You have the jawline or jowl line, however you want to say it, which comes down like this. So it makes a shape that kind of comes out, in, out, and back down. It connects to the chin area. We're not worrying about shadows right now. We're not worried about giving any type of rendering to light and shadow. We're going to basically just get the basic shape down first. Now her hair is in a sort of a bun, so just below her neckline, off to the right, I'm going to draw a shape like that. Okay, it's going to connect up to her hairline here, which comes up over top of her, on top of the cranium, and then down. On this side too, you can see a little bit here. Okay, so now we start to see the framing of the hair. Now we can determine, with this much information that we've gotten so far, where the ear possibly is and where we need to draw it. Based on the drawing, I see that she has a little bit of some shadow there, but let's come straight across from the eyes, and this will be where the tip of her ear will be. Okay, always remember that. Go from the eyebrow over to the side of the head, and if you draw that line really faintly, you can connect about where the ear shall be. Now we're drawing a full body figure here. We're going to include the baby. Some might think that's a little disturbing, but I apologize, but it's part of the lore, it's part of the actual history, so we're going to include it. Now what I'm doing here is I'm going to go ahead and erase some of these lines that I've made on the face, except for the ones I want to keep, which is going to be the eyebrows, nose, and lips, something like that. Then I go back in, and this is where it can be a little tricky, because when you're drawing eyes, eyes are symmetrical usually, and what you want to be careful about when you're drawing eyes is the placement of both those, because if you throw one off just a little bit, it's going to throw the whole face off. So what I do is I start at the top. I'll draw the top line of the eye first, where her eye, like her eyelashes would be. I may darken it in just a little bit, get a little bit of a curve to it there. Then what I do is I come over straight across to where the other eye should be, and I start to form a line there too. So you should have something that starts to resemble an eye if you just make a line just below your eyebrow and then bring it down on the right just a little bit. Now we need to frame it up a little bit, so we add a bottom line for where her cheek and her the bottom of her eye is, something like that. And then she's going to be looking sort of up, so we're going to do that. Now there's a really good play right now that is being featured here locally that tells a story about Octavia and what happened. And for the bicentennial coloring book that I did for the City of Pikeville, that I worked on for the City of Pikeville, not I did, but in that I had to do a lot of history, reading about Pikeville and what the events that took place, and apparently Octavia, she was pretty well to do. She was married to a hotel owner, I think James, she had the means to, you would think, to be able to help herself in that situation. But when you're depressed, you can't. You're in a state where, if you've ever dealt with depression, it's a real thing. Mental health is a very serious and important topic that we should not stigmatize. We need to have conversations about mental health, and then we need to, if we're not directly affected in any way by it, I feel that it's very important for us to at least understand it, and there's people that are hurting, and Octavia certainly was. So let's feature her now on her neckline. So she's wearing a dress, a very typical dress of that era, and what it is a shoulder. The shoulders are sort of flat here. Now, drawing fabric can be a little tricky. What I like to do is I go ahead and I make my lines first, and this is where you also can get into areas where you do disproportionate features. So you may be careful not to draw the arms too big, the head too big, and keeping in track with that so that you're rendering a drawing that at least resembles what you're hoping to resemble. In this case, a figure drawing. We want to be conscientious of the size of what we're drawing. So with this arm here, I'm going to sketch it out first real lightly. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of take a good look at it here and just see if it does seem like it would fit the body, if that makes sense. And of course, if it doesn't, we've got an eraser. So we're not worried too much about it. So what I've done is I come down. I've drawn a line coming down to connect to the elbow. And this is where the fabric comes in. So you're going to draw shapes that kind of overlap each other, coming back into the drawing, making folds of fabric like that. Now the dress is, of course, has an open neck to it, so we can jump back up here to the top, come down, connect that right there in the middle like that. And then from here, we need to go ahead and frame out her child. So we need to at least know where the child's going to be. Now she's holding the child, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just as I did at the top with an oval or egg shape. But the difference is when you're drawing a baby, of course, the features are going to be smaller. They're going to be more compact, and they're going to be more smaller. So we need to take that into account. And what we're going to do is we're going to start right here at the shoulder. Now the orientation of this head is going to be facing us a little bit. It's not the same orientation as the one at the top. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to draw this shape here, just right there connected to her shoulder. Now the baby's has its arms folded, so we're going to come down on this side with the line, come down on this side with the line, and what we're going to do here is we're going to, just like a stick figure, you're going to draw a line coming out. That's part of the arm. This arm's going to be bent a little bit. We draw a little bit of fabric here, kind of connecting the shoulder up to the head. Then we're going to draw a secondary line just over top of the line we drew, creating like the stick figure effect. And we're going to draw some fingers. Now, fingers can be really tricky, and since you can't really see this very well, I'm going to take just a second to show you something that might help you. I'm going to lay this drawing over to the side for a second. Okay, now, when you're drawing hands, usually what happens is the hands are going to be positioned like I'm positioning my hand here. So you imagine drawing a hand at various different perspectives, right? Where the fingers will be. What I like to do is I start with the meat of the hand, so the actual, all the tendons in here in this part of the hand. I like to draw that first. So if you need an idea on where to go, you may need to draw like two lines connecting up like this to form a wrist. Okay, so see how the lines, they're not parallel. If they kept going, they would eventually cross each other, right? So they're coming down, being smaller, a little bit smaller here. I'm just going to sketch out part of what might be an elbow there. Okay, now watch what I do. I come up and I draw the meat of the hand first. So the padding, right? The fat part of the hand, right here, like this. So once I have that drawn, I want to figure out where my thumb will be. So my thumb will be here. Okay, now I know where the thumb is. Once I know where the thumb is, I can go back and erase, but I can now start to add fingers, right? And that's the idea with a hand for me anyway. It helps me kind of, get an idea of where to start. Sometimes that's the hardest part when drawing hands. You don't know where to start at. But you can see how this will help you a little bit, hopefully. You don't have to use this technique, obviously, but if you're interested in trying to draw hands better, this helped me. So you can see here what I've done. I've drawn the meat of the hand. Now I've got the fingers protruding out. And what I can do from here is go back and put in detail, right? So that's what we're going to do basically for the baby's hand and Octavia's fingers too. And it might be a little bit hard to see, but you get the general idea. So if I say starting with the thumb, that's what I'm talking about. Okay. All right, back to our drawing, our subject. So we have one finger here. We'll add another right beside it. You don't have to add all of them. Just a couple will be fine because the thumb is being hidden, obviously, here by the other part of the hand. Now we have another arm coming up towards the face. So I drew two lines coming together, stopping before they actually hit each other. And this, we're just going to draw a hand folded, which is super easy to do. It's just a block with a couple of lines coming down. Now Octavia has her arm coming around the child here and then up. So now we start to form this elbow. This elbow will come across, the arm will come across here. And you want to look at the thickness of how you drew the first arm. That's important too. Okay, start with the meat of the hand. I got the widest part. Now I want to add fingers. I can't see the thumb. The thumb is behind the hand a little bit, but you can see her fingers. So what I'm doing is just adding two lines connecting at the end, folded back to the hand like that. Okay. It takes practice. I understand it's not one of the easier parts to really get a hold of when you're doing basic drawing, but that's why artists work with figure drawings their whole life sometimes, right? Now this hand here is actually holding up the baby. So what we need to do, we need to make sure that we show some weight of the child in her arms, okay? So this hand's kind of hidden underneath the weight of the baby. So you can see a portion of the child's legs coming down in here, okay? So you don't have to worry about drawing the feet of the child. You don't have to worry about drawing this other hand even because it's being sort of obviously covered up by some fabric here from the child, okay? Now, we're going to work a little bit on the body. So the body is going to come down. I don't know if we're going to have enough room to draw the actual feet, but in this example that I'm referencing, she's standing actually in the grave. So it's a little dark, but we're going to try to come down as far. We're going to render exactly what we're seeing here in this drawing. So it comes down here like that. And then on this side, another line coming down like this. Okay, so you have two lines that form her dress. Now we're at the stage of the drawing now where we start to wonder and consider detail. At the bottom, since we are running out of room and she's technically really not, her legs aren't shown in the original, we're going to come down close as we can to the bottom here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to seal this off with a line here going straight across the drawing. Okay. And then what I'm going to do from there is I'm going to come behind her about right here, and I'm going to draw another line coming out like this on each side. Okay? And then I'm going to connect those lines together. Now we'll add shadow down here in a minute and all that. You can put detail if you want. You can put the ground behind her. You can add some leaves. I'll show you how to do that in a second. So for a leaf, I start out with just a simple rectangle, and then I cascade out to a tip, and I come back in. And we may put a little bit of grass, to show that this is the ground, or a ground somewhere, the soil, the earth. I may add another line in the background. So that gives us a framing of what's happening here. It doesn't make sense yet a lot because we have no shadow. But we're going to move on. We're going to focus now on detail, specifically on detail. Well, actually, I lied to you. We have to finish the baby's face, don't we? So for the child's face, I forgot that completely, so let's jump up here. We're going to draw a line coming down the center, like that. And then just as we did with Octavia, we're going to draw a couple of lines showing where the eyes and nose and mouth will be. Now, for a child, the eyes and nose and mouth are closer together but they seem bigger on the face. So for that, we need to start to feature or create features in here that will resemble more of a child's features. So we're going to start out over here on this side with an eyebrow here. Then just below that, we're going to form the nose. Okay, and then we have the eyes. So the eyes can be drawn by just simply a straight line on both sides, and then you frame it out, similar to Octavia's, like this. And then you can add the pupils in there. Okay, and then we can add a little bit of hair at the top. There we go. I'm not really sure if Octavia had a little boy or a little girl. I'm not 100% on that facts, but I know it was it's pretty tragic. So we're going to erase that line down the middle now, like that. I erased a little bit too much. For the lips and things, we need to make his nose a little bit wider. There we go. Now, for the mouth, it's something really simple. We're just going to draw lips that come up and down here, and then a little bit of shadow at the bottom, okay? Something like that. Now, if you would like to see past episodes of the Art Workshop, we have a huge archive available on Pike TV's YouTube channel. So just search for Pike TV 99 on YouTube, and you should be able to find tons of references to all sorts of different techniques, subject matters, themes, all available there on the playlist. So you go there and search for playlist and then click on the Art Workshop, and you'll be able to watch all past episodes there. If you follow along with us and would like to send us something, we'd love to show it on the show here. And you can do that by sending it to us at piketv99@gmail.com. Just please include a little bit about yourself when you send it. That way we can attribute to whoever it was that submitted it. And we'd love to see your work. This show's about you. This is about us spending a little time together drawing. And when you follow along, that makes us really happy here at the station. Now I'm doing a little bit of detail around the neck. So this dress obviously has pattern, not patterns necessarily, but there's a, well, the dress itself is a pattern. But you have these little frills that go around the neckline right here. So we want to include those. Now, of course, down the chest, we need to put a little bit of some lines to show fabric, stretching a little bit, and coming down the shoulder here. The dress has lines that come down it, and you can draw those two parallel lines kind of going along with one another from the top to the bottom of the dress. You can add as many as you want. You can make them different widths, different sizes, but make sure you draw two lines running together when you do this. What you're doing is as you're working, you're thinking 2 steps ahead, or you try to. And in that case, thinking 2 steps ahead here means that we need to eventually start putting shadow in. So what these blocks that I've just created is basically like your own coloring book, but you're not coloring, you're going to be shading. And we're going to start that process now. This is about all the detail that I really need to go in and put shadow. And for that, I'm going to use the carbon pencil, and I'm going to start to include some shadow here under the chin, coming down her neck here. Fabric can be really tricky to show shadow and light shadow with, but you can pull it off. Now this side of the face is a little bit darker than the other side, so I'm going to put a little bit of shadow here, coming down the side of her face to the nose here, just a little bit. And then the hair, I've also, as I was sketching, left out purposefully certain areas when I was drawing these lines so that I could go back in and know where to place the darker lines now. So you can see how that starts to work. You want to consider where your light source is, obviously. In this case, you can almost imagine it's coming from up above. And the reason you can determine that, obviously, is the neck. Right? You see how the neck is darker here, so we assume that the light source is above. Now, if that's the case, and that's what we're going to go with, we need to think about this as we go down and start to add shadow. You want to place darker lines, blocks of shadow in certain areas that would be maybe a little bit more obscure from the light, right? It's more hidden. So on this side here, be a little bit darker underneath those frills. And then, of course, around the child. The graphite pencils are really good for this. And we talked a lot on the show in the past about smudging. And what can be done with that? You can take your finger, obviously, and you can kind of smudge it. They make sticks, little wood, not wooden, but cardboard sticks, literal sticks that you can buy if you want to, or you can use your finger, or just use some paper that you fold up really tight. Let's take a general 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, fold it up really, really tight, and then take that and use that to smudge with. But you can get different effects that way. Gradient of light and all that. So over here, we got shadow on her arm. And then we're going to also go up this side of the body, placing more blocks of shadow, especially around the child. You know, Halloween's a spooky time, right? So everybody gets in the mood, and if you do celebrate Halloween, and a lot of folks that you know, like to tell stories that are scary or has an element of myth to them. And we have a lot of legends here locally, and I love legends. I think that they're fascinating, especially the oral legends that are passed down. I know my great-grandmother would tell a story that she was riding home from, well, actually walking home from, you know, this one-room schoolhouse, and she was actually a teacher though, and she you know, she was. I never knew my grandma taught my great-grandmother to tell tall tales and stuff, but she absolutely is convinced that she saw, you know, a headless rider. So there you go. She's convinced she saw something like that on a trail coming home after teaching, probably this time of year, getting dark earlier. But ever since she told me that as a little kid, I mean, that completely convinced me that there's stuff out there. So I was convinced early on that there's more going on than we know, and so I love this time of year for legends and stories. Octavia's story, as we've mentioned already, is an absolute tragic story. It's not one to make light of at all. It's terrible, but it's also part of our history, and we all accept it as part of our history. Now I'm shadowing down the body. I'm getting closer to the midpoint of the figure drawing. This is going to be under the hands and arms. Now this will obviously be much darker, and then these blocks that you've created for the dress coming down, each one of those, just as you've done at the top up here, is going to be colored in with shading too. So let's go ahead and start on that. I'm going to bring a few lines coming down from the drawing first, kind of like a zebra pattern, before I put the block of shadow up here at the top. This will really cause the hands and the features here at the midsection to pop out more, I think, once we darken this in. Yeah, these graphite pencils are great for this. Trying to do this with just a regular pencil, it takes more time, especially if you don't have drawing pencils at home, which is fine. You don't need drawing pencils, but if you're using like an HB pencil, or 2H pencil, it takes more time. You have to keep on adding more and more graphite to it for it to darken more. And then there's a point eventually where you just can't get it any darker. So you notice how I brought these lines coming down from her body. Now I'm going to come up here, just below everything going on, and I'm going to place blocks of shadow going across the bottom or underneath her arm. I'm going to go underneath the hand here so you can see the fingers a little bit better. And then over here on this side, I'm going to put a lot of shadow underneath this arm, coming up the side of the body. So it helps to frame that section a little bit better. You can see once you darken that in, it pops out more. We're not done yet though. I'm going to now lighten how much pressure I'm placing on the pencil, and I'm going to come down the body with these strokes going left to right in certain areas. Now, if the light source is coming down from the top up here, obviously this side's going to be darker, right? So we need to keep that in mind. Like that. So let's just start. It starts to form a gradient, and you can see it just under the fingers probably really well right now, where one portion of it is much darker, and that's all about pressure, how much pressure you're pushing down. All right, so we've almost got shading for the dress done. Let's do a little more shading up here using this same technique, back and forth. Just going back and forth now. Underneath here, just a little bit lighter. If you do this enough, what happens is you start to get the effect of fabric, but it does take time to do that, for sure. A little bit of shadow here, just off to the left of her face and down on her neck a little bit. Show the collarbone just a little bit there. You can see how I've done that, just add a little line. We'll darken in the side of the head of the child a little bit more. There we go. Now I'm pressing down very lightly, but I'm still filling up all this white. Now I'm going to work on the shadow on the arm, so very lightly. Down here as well. So you can still see lines coming through as I shadow. So you can still see the lines that I made here. But what happens is it's a different gradient. So it gives the effect that there's, obviously like it happens in real life, where you have a gradient of shadows. You have very dark shadows and you have lighter shadows and that sort of thing. So now we've got the dress and the figure pretty much lined out, but now what we're going to focus on is the bottom down here. And as you can see from our subject image, it wraps around her and comes behind her as we've drawn this at the bottom. So I'm going to use this larger graphite pencil for this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw lines coming up from where she's standing a little bit, and it's going to hopefully give the effect that she is standing down in a into a hole. Okay, so across the body here, some more lines coming out from there, and then I'm darkening those in really, really good, like that. Okay, and from there what we're going to do is we're going to come back in and we're lightly going to go back and forth like we did on the body, and we're going to form more shadow going around the bottom of this forefront image. So now I'm making mounds, see? Just adding shapes. Go around the front. Maybe darken this in a little bit more here. Coming up the dress. Almost like the shadow is creeping up the dress. It's a neat effect to it. A little bit there, and at the bottom. Now we have the back side to do, and then we have this left side to do. Now we've put this together in relatively short time, if you think about it. Figure drawing doesn't normally work that way. If you're trying to do something photorealistic, it can take, you could render something for days and days and weeks and really, really get into it. I've just never had the patience to do actual portrait drawings. I think I've done it before and it's turned out okay. But like I said, though, my style is sort of in between character drawing, animation, and comic, and so they all have that certain illustration look to them when I try to draw a photorealistic drawing. Okay, so now what we have here is we have the background, of course, that you can darken in certain areas too. A little bit of shadow. Not too much, just a little bit to kind of give. Now, if you've ever visited the gravesite, her gravesite and her child's, it is by University of Pikeville. So it's actually there if you want to go and see the actual grave where she lays at peace, hopefully. So I know when I went to, when I was an undergrad at UPike, I would sometimes go out there and get a little spooky, you know. You can add a tree if you want, background. So just drawing a simple tree kind of popping up from this area. So that gives the effect at the hillside, so it coming down, see that? And then you can come up to the top here and finish that out. Drawing trees can be really therapeutic. I don't know why, but I think it's just a chaotic kind of take on all these limbs going in every different direction. And you can add as many as you want. You know, it doesn't matter. It's just, they're fun to draw. And all you really need to do to draw one is just take 2 lines and run those sort of parallel at first, and then tighten it up and add your limbs. Here we go. So I'm running out of paper on the side, but that's okay. Maybe a couple leaves still on the limbs here. I'm just drawing little shapes that kind of resemble a triangle in a way, but more of a diamond shape, I guess, more. So there we go. And now, of course, with shadowing on the tree, if you really wanted to get into it, you could just take back and forth motion. Remember where your light source is. Bring it down. It just gives more of a continuity to the picture. Helps reinforce where that light source is, you know. So that's always a good thing to have. And then from here, if you wanted to, you could also add the sky in there. And of course, if you wanted to make it nighttime, you could just basically take your pencil, go back and forth in really broad strokes. I'm not trying to darken this in all the way. I may actually fade this out a little bit, so maybe this is right at dusk or something like that. And of course, behind the tree would be a little bit darker here. I'm running out of paper. There we go. And then around here, bring it up too, just as you did on the other side. Back and forth motion with your pencil. And what this does is it helps to frame this image in the middle too, if you fade it out like that. So this is all about pressure. Just barely pressing down as I get out towards the edge. As I get closer, darken it in a little more. Lighten it up, that kind of thing, okay? And maybe you can see the moon. Drawing a circle that's a circle is the hardest thing in the world, but, and then of course, if you wanted to, you could put some shading kind of around here so that the moon pops out just a little bit more. You could keep on shading this forever and finding new things that happen when you add certain things, take certain things away. And we haven't really talked about deduction drawing, where you make lines and then you go in with your eraser and actually can draw with the eraser in certain ways. We should cover that eventually at some point, I think, on the show. But as you can see, though, we started out with this basic shape of what a figure will hopefully look like. Now, it does look a little weird where she's standing in the hole because you can't see her feet. So technically, I think her body would probably come down to about right here? Something like that, maybe? So that's cut off at the bottom. So that may throw you off when you look at it, but Generally speaking, though, I think we've captured the likeness of Octavia fairly well. And I hope you followed along today. I hope you've enjoyed the show. If you have, we'd love to see what you create. That's something major we really want to stress here, is that we want to showcase your work. So if you have something that you'd like to show us that's maybe not even a part of what we've covered, we'd still like to show your art. So please, again, send it in to us at piketv99@gmail.com. Include your name, how much information you want to include about yourself is great, and we'll love to share your work here on the show. Well, it's that season. It's that time of year. It's getting colder, and I know everybody's looking forward, or hopefully looking forward, to a fun fall with a lot of festivals that's happening, a lot of events taking place. Take advantage of those things. Look into your community calendar. Find out what's happening around you. Get engaged with your community. The stronger our community is, the more likelihood for us to, should anything ever happen where we need to come together, we're a community. That's part of building that. So I hope you'll do that this fall for sure. So thank you for your time, and I hope you've had fun today. At least if you haven't drawn along, watching us draw. If you have, though, we'd love to see it. And I hope everybody has a really, really happy fall. And until next time, on behalf of everyone here at the station and on Pike TV and the Art Workshop, I'm Christopher Epling. Keep drawing.